Here's what no one tells you about learning Portuguese. It's not just about memorizing how to order a caipirinha in Rio or perhaps a pastel de nata in Lisbon. In fact, the things no one warns you about can make or break your journey to fluency. As someone who taught Portuguese to people from all over the world and saw so many people struggle with the same mistakes, I've decided to break it all down into a few key things you must consider before you start. Hello world, I'm Bia, welcome back to my channel, and I'm very excited to make this video because I think it's my very first video actually speaking about Portuguese, so the time has come finally. And if you're thinking of learning Portuguese, please keep watching this video and watch it until the end because I have a lot of stuff to tell you. Alright, so first things first, you have to decide which Portuguese you are going to learn. And then you may ask me, oh Bia, there's only one Portuguese. And yes, that's pretty much true. When talking about Portuguese, I would say that we are referring to something similar to what happens in French language. So we have the French from France and we have the French from Canada, which are very different from each other if you're familiar with French language. And also it sounds very different. With Portuguese, it's kind of similar. I would say that it's very important for you to define from the beginning which Portuguese to choose. So in case you have a family member from Angola, Mozambique, it's very important to learn that specific accent, I would say, and that specific version of the Portuguese language. So right in the beginning, you're like, okay, Bia, how can I decide? Guys, this is the part that it's the most beautiful part about the language learning, in my opinion, which is connection. This is the moment that you have to think to yourself, okay, in the future, how do I want to use this language? Am I learning because of work? Am I learning because of a hobby? Or perhaps you have a partner that speaks Portuguese as their native language and they're from Portugal or from Brazil. So that's the moment that you have to decide which Portuguese you should pursue. If there isn't any strong reason, such as a family member or you're going to a certain country that speaks Portuguese soon, then just have fun. In this case, just consume content. Perhaps Portuguese from Portugal can caught your attention by the way they say amo-te and not te amo like Brazilians. So I recommend thinking about your long-term goals. Now that you decide the accent that you want to learn, please watch content with that accent from day one. And I'm not talking specifically and only about series and movies because I know that it's a bit harder to find content in Portuguese if you're not in a Portuguese speaking country. Use YouTube. Guys, there are so many YouTubers that speak Portuguese and so many big YouTubers with big numbers. Like they're definitely not that famous in the US or in the UK, but if you check them out in Brazil, in Portugal, they're huge, especially with numbers. Like you look at the numbers they have and you're like, how do I not know this guy? He has like 40 million subscribers. And this is the nice thing about learning Portuguese, is that you're going to learn a whole different world. And I'm not joking, if you immerse yourself, for example, in the Brazilian culture, they're just different. I'll add in the description my recommendation of YouTubers that I like and that are from Brazil. So if you're learning Brazilian Portuguese, I do recommend checking them out. At least this is my personal experience, but I realized that it's way harder for me to watch a movie in a foreign language and understand it than actually watch a YouTuber, because they just use vocabulary that it's really more common than sometimes the vocabulary from the movies you watch. Tip number 3, practice, practice, and practice. Yes, practice, and again, and again, and again. I know it's hard, especially if you don't speak another Romance language, and if your native language is English, I know that you can look at that and think, why do they have 2 verbs to say the verb to be? I also wonder why sometimes, but honestly, once you understand the meaning behind them too, it's actually really poetic. So in my opinion, the best way for you to learn verb conjugation in a language, guys, is by practicing. And when I mean practicing, I don't mean printing a table and just, you know, conjugating. That definitely helps. I think that's very useful in the beginning. But what's way more useful and way more practical? Talking. Speaking. I know this is a bit scary in the beginning because you want to talk Portuguese and then you come up with a Brazilian with a very strong accent and speaks fast and you're like, eu não entendo. Create sentences using the verbs you're learning. So if you learned how to say I thought or I think, instead of conjugating I think, you think, he, she, it thinks, why don't you create phrases with the verb to think? Or you can have a bit more fun and create questions and then answer your own questions. Like, do you think summer's nice? Or why do you think summer is nice? And then, oh, I think summer is nice because this, and that. Guys, I cannot stress enough how much spoken Portuguese is different from written Portuguese. If you chose Brazilian Portuguese specifically, you will notice that the way they talk and the way Portuguese is written, or the way you learn, totally different. Please make sure to learn the spoken Portuguese. And what do I mean by that? For example, what is that? Instead of saying, o que é isso? It's very common for you to hear Brazilians saying, que é isso? Que é isso? And then you can get confused because you're like, okay, that's not really what I studied. Why are they saying que é isso? Instead of o que é isso? So I definitely recommend talking to people from day one, even if you just learned how to say oi, tudo bem? I recommend checking some communities on Reddit such as Portuguese language, learning Portuguese, Brazil, and interacting with a native speaker or interacting with someone that has a more advanced level than you will teach you things that you wouldn't really see on a textbook. So for example, to say hi in Portuguese, you can say olá or oi. However, if you didn't understand what someone said or someone spoke something and you're like, wait, did I hear correctly? You can say oi. Or if you want to show that you're surprised by something that the other person said, you can say oi. The same oi that you say to say hi to people is the same oi that you can use to react to a gossip. You will learn the pace, the speed, and the flow that they speak. So for example, if Brazilians speak more like this and more like that, it sounds almost like a song, you know? It's really good for you to get in contact with locals from the beginning, because then you will notice this and you will start to sound more like a local. Not that it has to be the goal, but you'll sound more natural when you're speaking. Now, my last tip. You just need to know the letters that they cut and those small expressions that they use at the end of phrases. For example, a lot of Brazilians at the end of the phrase, they say, né, né, né. Não, porque eu tava trabalhando, né? I know that for a lot of people, it's not really pleasing to hear those small words at the end, or those small words that we already have in English, such as like, you know, because I know that at a certain point, it starts to be addictive. Like, you just say that word over and over again, you're like, oh, I just used that word without any reason. But sometimes it's good to use those small words at the end of phrases. In Brazilian Portuguese, né is a colloquial contraction of não é, and it usually means right, isn't it, or you know. So it's commonly used at the end of the sentences to seek confirmation or agreement, and also to emphasize or invite a connection. So tell me in the comments if you're learning Portuguese, if you are a beginner, if you're a native speaker watching this video just because you are curious. If you guys want more videos related to Portuguese language, also let me know. And I see you in the next video. Also, subscribe to my channel. I forgot. Subscribe. Subscribe to my channel. And yeah, I see you in the next video. Bye!